In the silence between centuries, a whisper endures, a voice carried through sand and stone, calling out from a time before memory. You did not arrive here by chance. Something older than history has drawn you to this moment, a thread of destiny woven through forgotten ages. For thousands of years, the world has stared at the monuments of the ancients, their walls, their symbols, their impossible stones, yet the truth behind them has remained sealed, hidden beneath the weight of time and silence. Who built them? For what purpose? And why does every trace of their origin seem to vanish into mystery? Some say these are merely tombs, relics of mortal kings. Others feel the echo of something greater, a message carved in geometry and starlight, left behind by a civilization whose memory was erased. Tonight, that silence will break. You are about to step into a realm where myth and truth intertwine, where ancient knowledge breathes again, and the stones of the earth remember. Listen closely. The past is speaking, and if you truly hear it, it might change everything you thought you knew about the story of humankind. There are places on this earth where time itself seems to hold its breath, where the wind whispers not through leaves, but through the memory of civilizations long turned to dust. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands among them, not merely as a monument, but as an echo of something vast and unspoken. I remember the first time I stood before it. The air was still, heavy with that strange quiet that belongs only to places too ancient to be understood. The desert around it shimmered like an ocean of light, and for a moment I felt that what lay before me was not a structure, but a frozen pulse, a heartbeat of the world, stopped in mid-beat, preserved for those who could still hear it. They told us the story, the familiar one, that this was the tomb of a god-king named Khufu, built by the sweat of countless men under the burning sun, armed with nothing but copper and faith. A noble tale, perhaps. Yet when I looked upon the precision of the stones, the impossible geometry, the cold perfection of every angle, I felt a tremor of doubt. For how could a story so grand rest upon foundations of silence? The Egyptians chronicled everything: harvests, wars, taxes, the songs of priests, but of this, nothing. Not a single line carved in stone, not one papyrus whispering, I, Khufu, built this. It was then I began to understand. Sometimes the loudest truths are not spoken, but withheld. The absence itself becomes the message. Like a missing verse in a sacred text, the void calls out to those willing to listen beyond the words. What if this monument was not built for death, but for remembrance? Not to house a body, but to preserve a secret? In the dim light of early dawn, I traced my hand along the weathered limestone. The surface was cool, unnervingly smooth, as if shaped not by crude chisels, but by something that understood the rhythm of matter itself. The granite blocks above the king's chamber weighed as much as 70 tons, brought from quarries hundreds of miles away. Even now, with all our machines and steel, such a task would challenge us. Yet here it was, perfect, silent, unbroken. And so the first crack appeared in the story we had been taught. The scholars spoke of laborers and ropes, of ramps and sweat and time, but the numbers betrayed them: 2 million stones, each placed with mathematical precision in just 20 years, one stone every 2 minutes, day and night. No pause, no margin for error. The more I studied, the more it felt like trying to balance the weight of the impossible upon the shoulders of the ordinary. Perhaps the question was never how, but who, because In the oldest sands of Egypt, I found not the voice of a single people, but the echo of something older, a civilization that built as if it knew the very music of the cosmos. And though their names have been erased, their geometry endures. The alignment of the pyramid to true north is so precise that it deviates by less than 1/15 of a degree. Not magnetic north, which shifts, but true north, the axis of the earth itself. Such precision is not born of guesswork. It is the language of the stars. At night, I watched Orion rise above the desert horizon, its 3 stars glimmering in perfect reflection of the 3 great pyramids below. The alignment was too exact to be coincidence. It was as if the builders had written in stone a message from the sky, a mirror between heaven and earth. And when I traced the stars back through time using ancient celestial maps, I found the alignment pointed not to the age of Khufu, but to a far older epoch around 10,500 BC, when the constellation Leo rose to meet the dawn, and the Sphinx, with its lion's body, gazed directly into its celestial reflection. In that moment, I felt the chill of recognition. It was as if the sands themselves whispered, "We were not the first." Maybe the builders were not men of the 4th dynasty, but heirs to something forgotten, custodians of a knowledge passed down from an age when the world was different, when gods walked beside men and the stars themselves were maps of memory. And as the sun rose over Giza, painting the pyramid in molten gold, I knew that beneath its silence lay not a tomb, but a testimony, a message carved in eternity, waiting for us to remember. It was not built for the dead. It was built for the awakening. In the vaults of forgotten libraries and beneath the ruins of broken temples, fragments of another story begin to whisper through the dust, a story older than kings and older than the Nile itself, one that does not start with Egypt, but with something that came before. I once came across a papyrus fragment hidden deep within a monastery archive near Luxor, its edges blackened by time. The ink had faded, but what remained spoke of Zep-Tepi the first time, the age when gods walked with men and the foundations of the world were laid in light. Scholars dismissed it as myth, but I could feel, even through its fragile fibers, that this was not legend. It was memory. The fragment described a structure that could speak to the heavens, a beacon of divine resonance aligned to the heart of the stars. It mentioned not the name of any pharaoh, but the keepers of the measure, builders who carried the wisdom of the sun before the flood came. Could this have been the genesis of the Great Pyramid itself, a relic from a civilization drowned and reborn? In the hidden chambers of Giza, I began to feel that connection. The stones were not mute. They hummed faintly when touched, as though still alive with the frequency of their creation. I placed my ear to one and could almost hear the echo, a low vibration, like a song lost in the bones of the earth. And I remembered the line from the fragment, the sound that binds the sky to stone. It spoke not of burial, but of energy, of resonance, a bridge between worlds. Many believe the past is a straight line, but here it folded back on itself. The geometry of the pyramid is a code, the circumference of the earth, the ratios of the heavens, all hidden in plain sight. How could men of the Bronze Age have known these things unless they inherited them? Each measurement, each angle feels less like architecture and more like remembrance, as if they were trying to preserve a message from an age already sinking beneath the waves. There are clues buried in myth, the deluge, the lost island of memory that Plato called Atlantis. The flood of Utnapishtim, the tales of Ziusudra, all speak of a great civilization swallowed by water, its survivors scattering like seeds across the world, carrying fragments of forgotten knowledge. What if Egypt was not the dawn of civilization, but the twilight of another? I remember standing before the Sphinx at dusk, its silent face eroded by millennia of sand and wind, but beneath its scars I saw something older, the curve of stone carved not by desert storms, but by rain, rain that had not touched this land for over 10,000 years. The body of the Sphinx seemed to pulse with the memory of water, and in that instant I understood what Dr. Robert Schoch and John Anthony West had glimpsed, that this monument had watched not just the rise of Egypt, but the drowning of a world before it. The erosion was not just geological. It was historical, the wearing away of truth under the sands of accepted narrative. Yet, even as centuries tried to bury it, the truth endured. It waited, sealed in silence, until those who could still hear the call of the ancients would come searching again. That night, as I left Giza, I looked up once more at the sky. Orion shimmered in the darkness, eternal, unchanging, the same stars that watched over those who built this wonder, and in their cold light I felt the pull of something vast, something that whispered through the stones. Remember, for history is not written in ink, but in vibration carved into the bones of the earth itself, and those who learn to listen may yet recover what was lost. When knowledge threatens the order of the world, it is often guarded not by walls, but by silence. Across centuries, a few have held the keys to that silence, those who decide what may be known and what must remain buried. In Egypt, that guardian has a name, Zahi Hawass. To many, he is the protector of Egypt's legacy, the man who kept treasure hunters and charlatans at bay. But to others, to those who sought the deeper truth, he is the last sentinel standing before the gates of revelation. I met one of his former assistants once, a man who had grown weary of secrets. He spoke softly, as though even the air might betray him. "There are things beneath Giza," he whispered, "things that are not meant to be spoken of." He told me of doors sealed within the pyramid's heart, not by chance but by decree, of narrow shafts leading into darkness, blocked by perfect limestone slabs with copper fittings that glimmered like eyes in the torchlight. These were not the crude relics of a tomb. They were mechanisms, engineered closures, designed to protect what lay beyond. The story was always the same. Discoveries made, then swiftly silenced. In 1993, the German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a robot named Upuaut, the opener of the ways, to crawl through one of those narrow shafts. The world watched as its small camera revealed a mysterious door, polished, smooth, unmarked, impossibly precise. Behind it, copper handles shone like relics of another world. The image flashed across the world's screens, and for a heartbeat it seemed the sands might yield their secret. But then permission withdrawn, access denied. The door remained sealed. Why? In 2002, they drilled a hole through that first door. Behind it, another space and another door. Beyond that, nothing more was allowed. The official word was to protect the monument, but in the tone of those who spoke it, I heard something else. Fear, not of damage, but of discovery. For what if what lay beyond those doors did not belong to Egypt alone? What if it belonged to the world, to humanity, before it forgot itself? Years later, the Scan Pyramids project uncovered something far greater. a vast, hidden void, the size of a passenger jet, deep within the structure. It should have been the greatest revelation in modern archaeology, a confirmation that the pyramid still held unseen chambers. But once again, the silence returned. Officials downplayed it, dismissed it, locked it away beneath bureaucracy. They called it a structural anomaly. But I have seen the data, the scans that show a hollow space perfectly aligned above the Grand Gallery. It is no accident. It is a vault waiting. It becomes harder not to see a pattern. Discovery, then denial. Truth, then suppression. Perhaps those who hold the power to open these secrets are not villains, but prisoners of their own narrative. The foundations of Egyptology rest upon one fragile certainty, that all this was built by the hands of men 4,500 years ago. To admit otherwise would unravel the very timeline of civilization itself. But I have learned that truth is a patient thing. It does not die. It waits. The ancients understood this. They built not for their own generation, but for ours. They encoded their knowledge in the one language that endures stone. In a hidden chamber beneath Saqqara, I once brushed dust from a granite surface so smooth it reflected the flame of my lamp like glass. Every edge was perfect, each angle impossible. The stone hummed faintly beneath my palm as though responding to my touch. It was not a coffin, as the guides claimed. It was a machine, or perhaps an instrument, built for a purpose we no longer remember. And in that dark stillness, I felt it again. The sense of being watched, not by ghosts, but by memory itself. The weight of forgotten eyes that seemed to ask, "Will you open the door? Or will you turn away like the rest?" For every truth buried in sand, another rises in stone, and somewhere beneath our feet, behind the sealed limestone door, something ancient is still waiting to awaken. Night in the desert is unlike any other silence. The air holds its breath, and the stars feel closer, as though each one is an eye, watching, remembering. It was under that sky that I began to see what the ancients had left for us, not in words, but in alignment. For the Great Pyramid is not only a monument of stone, it is a map, a celestial mirror. Long before telescopes or compasses, the builders of Giza laid their blocks with a precision that defies the ages. The four sides of the Great Pyramid face the cardinal directions with near-perfect accuracy, aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree. This was no accident of chance or guesswork. It was the language of the cosmos, translated into geometry, and when the night deepened and Orion's belt rose over the horizon, I understood why. The three stars, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka, stood in the sky as three fires of the gods. Below them, the three pyramids gleamed in reflection. The arrangement was exact. As above, so below. This was no mere tribute to heaven. It was a union. The ancients had not built to worship the stars. They had built to speak with them. It was Robert Bauval, the engineer, who first saw the pattern, who uncovered the staggering truth. When the sky is rewound through the cycles of precession, the slow wobble of the earth that shifts the stars across millennia, the perfect alignment between Orion and the pyramids occurs not in 2500 BC, but in 10,500 BC. That date returned again and again, whispered by stone and star alike. The same era when the Sphinx, carved with the body of a lion, gazed eastward to greet the constellation of Leo at dawn. The sky itself was the blueprint, and the monuments were the mirror. I remember the first time I saw that alignment projected on the sand. It felt like the world had turned itself inside out. The heavens were not looking down upon earth. Earth was remembering the heavens, and in that moment, I knew these were not tombs of death. They were markers of time, beacons from a forgotten civilization who had survived something catastrophic, and who had tried to leave a message for those who would come after. There are ancient texts, fragments of priestly hymns, and a book of the coming forth by day that speak of the first time when the gods walked the earth and built according to the stars. Egyptologists dismiss it as myth, but what if it is not poetry, but memory? The word Zep-Tepi the first time echoes through temple inscriptions like an invocation of a world before the flood. The ancients never said it would come. They said it had come before, and in the language of stone, the pyramid whispers that warning still. When I looked deeper into the alignment, I found something that made my heart tremble. On that same date, 10,500 BC, the Milky Way curved across the sky in perfect reflection of the Nile, the river of heaven and the river of earth, one above, one below, flowing in harmony. The Giza complex was not just architecture. It was a cosmic equation, a reminder that we were once in balance with the stars, and that one day that balance would break. But how could a people from that distant age have known the Earth's axial precession, a cycle of nearly 26,000 years? Such knowledge demands centuries of observation, mathematical precision, and a science far beyond what history credits to the ancient world. Unless, of course, they were not learning, but remembering. It struck me then that the pyramid was not a tomb, not even a temple, but a chronicle, a stone archive from a vanished age, encoding the knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and the catastrophe that erased it. Every block is a verse in a hymn to eternity, every angle a coordinate in time, and perhaps, if we could read it as they once did, we might hear what the stars are still trying to say, that the story of civilization did not begin with Egypt, it began with the sky. In the desert wind that night, I felt the tremor of that revelation, the kind that does not merely inform, but awakens. I knew then that these monuments were not relics of pride, but memorials of loss, a message written in light for those who would one day remember who they truly are. The stars were never our destination. They were our origin. There is a sound that no one records, but every traveler at Giza feels it a hum beneath the earth, low and steady, like the vibration of a sleeping giant. I heard it first inside the king's chamber. It was not an echo, not air or trick of stone, but something deeper, as if the granite itself remembered the frequency of its creation. The more I stood there, the more I felt the structure come alive around me, and I began to understand what the ancients might have meant when they said the pyramid spoke to heaven. Modern archaeologists tell us these chambers were tombs, but the evidence denies them. No hieroglyphs, no bodies, no offerings, only silence and precision beyond explanation. The granite coffer within the king's chamber is not decorated, not sealed, not even large enough to hold the body of a god-king. It bears the scars of cutting long parallel grooves etched with mechanical regularity, as if carved by a machine that once knew no hesitation. I have walked among the ruins of Saqqara and Abydos, where immense granite boxes lie half buried in shadow. Each one weighs over 100 tons, carved from a single piece of stone. The surfaces are mirror smooth, their corners perfect, their interiors polished to a precision measured not in millimeters, but in thousandths of an inch. Modern engineers, when shown the data, admit reluctantly this is not handwork. Christopher Dunn, a machinist rather than an archaeologist, once measured the coffer in the Great Pyramid and found its planes so exact they could only have been made by tools guided with mathematical control, as if someone, thousands of years ago, had mastered a technology capable of shaping stone the way we shape metal today. The drill cores left in Aswan granite show spiraling grooves, the unmistakable pattern of high-speed cutting. The rate of descent, 1 inch per 100 revolutions, exceeds the limits of our diamond-tipped drills. Copper tools and sand could not have done this. The truth was clear. These were not tools of survival, but instruments of mastery. I placed my hand once on the lid of one of those boxes. The air inside the chamber felt charged, as if the walls themselves were conducting energy. Sound carried differently. It didn't echo. It resonated. I whispered a single word, and it lingered, suspended, amplified, transformed. I realized then that this architecture was not built to contain death. It was built to manipulate vibration, to harness resonance. The ancients knew something we do not, that sound and stone are kin, that geometry is not static, but alive. Imagine for a moment a civilization whose science was not of engines and metal, but of frequency and form. A world where music and mathematics were one where to build was to sing matter into order. Perhaps the Great Pyramid was not a monument at all, but a kind of instrument, a generator, a transmitter, a bridge between worlds. The shafts, the chambers, the harmonic ratios all aligned like the components of a design beyond ritual, beyond faith. And yet, as the ages turned and memory faded, that science became myth. The instruments were mistaken for tombs, the equations for prayers, the builders for gods. But what if those gods were simply the remnants of a civilization that understood the true nature of energy, that consciousness and vibration are one and the same? In the stillness of that granite room, I felt it not as belief, but as recognition. A pulse older than humanity, echoing through the geometry. The ancients built not for worship, but for remembrance, to preserve a law of the universe that time itself could not erase. Outside, the night wind rose across the desert, carrying sand through the cracks of stone. The stars shimmered like embers in the sky, and I thought of the words inscribed on the temple walls of Abydos, "As it was in the beginning, so shall it be again." Perhaps these machines of stone are not relics of the past, but prophecies, engines awaiting the return of those who can awaken them once more. There are moments in the search for truth when history itself seems to breathe, when the dust of ages stirs, and what we thought was myth begins to move beneath the light. It was one such moment when I first read the words of Graham Hancock. We are a species with amnesia. He was not speaking in metaphor. He was naming a condition, the forgetting of an entire chapter of humanity's story. What if civilization did not rise once but twice? Long before the pharaohs, before Sumer or Babylon, there may have been another age, one erased not by conquest, but by catastrophe. Around 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the earth was struck by fire from the heavens. Comet fragments, falling upon the ice sheets of North America, unleashed a deluge that swallowed continents. The Younger Dryas, they call it now, a time when the world burned, then drowned, then froze again. Sea levels rose by hundreds of feet. Whole coastlines vanished. The survivors, if any, would have carried with them not tools, but memories. And perhaps, among those scattered wanderers, a few remembered the science of the stars, the geometry of the earth, the laws of vibration. They became the seed-bearers of civilization, carrying fragments of a drowned world into the deserts and mountains of the new one. When I look at the ruins of Giza, of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, I see not isolated miracles, but echoes of the same forgotten mind, the same obsession with precision, alignment, resonance. These were not primitive attempts at worship. They were reconstructions, tributes to what once was. Göbekli Tepe, older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, stands like an impossible survivor of that vanished dawn. Its carved pillars are alive with symbols of lions, vultures, foxes, guardians of knowledge. It was not built by nomads. It was built by remembrance. What the textbooks call the birth of civilization was perhaps the rebirth, the reawakening of knowledge too sacred to die. Egypt was not the beginning, it was the echo. The true beginning lies buried beneath the sea, beneath the floodplains of myth. Every culture remembers the flood. The Sumerians told of Ziusudra, the Hebrews of Noah, the Greeks of Deucalion, the Maya, the Hindus, the Dogon, all speak of a great deluge that erased an age of light. Across the world, the story repeats, humanity destroyed by its own hubris, then guided anew by teachers from the stars, luminous beings who rebuilt what was lost. But what if those stars were not celestial in the way we imagine? What if they were the survivors of that first world, returning by sea to rebuild among the ruins? I have seen their fingerprints in the stones, the polygonal walls of Cusco, the megaliths of Baalbek, the Osirian at Abydos. All share an engineering language that transcends geography. These builders spoke in megaliths, in alignments, in silence. Theirs was not the art of domination, but of remembrance. Sometimes, when I study the symmetry of the pyramids, I feel that they were not meant to glorify men, but to remind us of our fragility, to warn that civilizations, no matter how advanced, can be swept away in an instant. Perhaps the builders of that lost world left their monuments as we might leave messages in a bottle not to boast, but to be remembered. Standing on the Giza Plateau at dawn, I could almost feel them, those forgotten architects, not as gods, but as echoes of ourselves. I imagined their hands shaping the first stones, knowing that their world was ending, but refusing to let its knowledge die. They built for us, for the ones who would forget, and someday remember again. The winds that sweep across Giza tonight are the same that carried the ash of their fires. The sand beneath our feet may once have been the shore of their cities. And when I close my eyes, I can almost hear their final prayer, not of despair, but of hope. Let the stars remember. Let the stones speak when men forget. We are not their descendants. We are their return. There are places in this world where myth and geology meet, where the ground itself seems to breathe with the memory of another time. In the golden silence of the desert, where the air trembles with heat and the dunes shift like the surface of an ancient sea, the names of forgotten gods still echo between stone and shadow. Among them, one name rises again and again, Osiris, the Lord of the afterlife, the judge of souls, the keeper of the hidden chamber. Yet, as I traced his name through the hieroglyphs carved deep into the temple walls of Abydos, I began to wonder if Osiris was not a god at all, but a memory, the echo of a man, or perhaps a lineage of beings who once carried the light of a lost civilization into the darkness that followed a great destruction. The ancient Egyptians called them Neteru, the divine ones. But the word Neta does not mean God in the way we use it today. Its symbol was not a throne or a halo, but a flag planted in the ground, a sign of vibration, of energy anchored into the earth. The Neteru were not ethereal beings from distant heavens. They were masters of frequency and form, beings who understood the hidden architecture of creation. Their temples were not houses of worship, but engines of resonance, instruments designed to align the human soul with the music of the cosmos. To the untrained eye, Egypt's ruins appear as mere stone. To the initiated, they are equations, the frozen harmonics of divine law. I realized this truth most profoundly beneath the temple of Seti the Firm, in a place few have ever seen, the Osirian. It lies below the surface, carved into the bedrock as though it were meant to outlast the world itself. Massive granite pillars rise from a floor once covered in water. Their surface is undecorated, unadorned by hieroglyphs or royal names. They do not proclaim power, they emanate it. The moment I stepped into that chamber, I felt it. The air grew heavier, denser, as if the atmosphere itself was remembering something sacred. The light from my torch flickered across the polished surfaces of the stone, revealing an architecture that felt alien to the hands of men. No scholar could tell me who built it. The temple above, built by Seti I in the 13th century BC, bears the marks of his dynasty, ornate reliefs, prayers to Osiris, scenes of ceremony. But the structure below bears none of that. Its style is older, thousands of years older. Some say it belongs to the 4th dynasty, others to the 1st. But in my heart, as I stood before those pillars, I knew it was older still, from a time when the gods still walked among men, or when men still remembered how to build like gods. When I laid my hand against one of the monoliths, the granite was cool and smooth, and beneath the silence I felt a faint vibration, a hum, steady and low, like the resonance of a struck tuning fork that refuses to fade. It was the same sensation I had felt inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, a frequency so deep it bypassed hearing and spoke directly to the bones. I whispered, and the sound did not echo, it multiplied, circling back through the walls as if the chamber itself were responding. It was in that moment I understood. The ancients had not merely built with stone. They had built through it. They were shaping the earth's vibration, conducting energy through geometry, harmonizing the physical and the divine. If the Osirian was a sanctuary of resonance, then the Serapeum of Saqqara was its echo chamber. Deep beneath the sands north of Memphis lies a tunnel system stretching for hundreds of meters, its walls blackened by torchlight, its corridors lined with colossal granite boxes, 25 of them, each weighing between 70 and 100 tons. The official story says these were tombs for the sacred Apis bulls. But no inscription, no offering, no trace of death has ever been found within them. Only the perfection of geometry. When I stood before one of those boxes, I was overwhelmed not by its size, but by its precision. The interior walls were so flawlessly flat that my reflection stared back at me from the darkness. Engineers who have measured them say the margins of error are smaller than those achieved with modern machining tools. The lid alone weighs 30 tons, yet it fits perfectly, airtight, as though designed to trap not a body, but a frequency. The silence in that place is not empty, it vibrates. I once hummed softly, just to test the acoustics, and to my astonishment, the chamber answered. The sound expanded, deepened, and returned magnified, as if the granite itself had remembered its original song. In that vibration, I felt the same pulse I had sensed in Giza and Abydos, the heartbeat of an ancient science now reduced to myth. Christopher Dunn, a man trained not in archaeology but in precision engineering, once proposed that the pyramids and the great granite boxes were components of a vast energy system structures that channeled the natural frequencies of the earth. Many mocked him. But when I stood there, I understood. The ancients may have known that the planet itself sings that beneath the crust and sand there is a rhythm, a resonance. They built not machines of metal, but machines of stone. Theirs was a technology of the soul, and yet over time that knowledge decayed. When the last of the Neteru vanished, their wisdom turned to ritual. Their frequencies turned to prayers. Their harmonics became hymns. The priests of later ages repeated the motions but had long forgotten the meaning. They offered gold and incense where once sound and geometry had sufficed. The divine became superstition. The builders became gods, and what was once science became myth. Still, the stones remember. Every tone that ever passed through them remains recorded in their lattice. Every vibration that touched their surface still hums, faintly, waiting. This is why we feel awe, not because of what we see, but because the frequencies carved into the stone still speak to the deepest part of our being. They awaken something ancient within us, something we once knew. Perhaps that is why the guardians of history are so afraid to listen. For if we truly heard what the stones are saying, we would remember that divinity is not above us, but within us. The gods were never gods. They were reflections. They were us before we forgot. And when I left the Serapeum that night, I turned back once more toward the dark corridor, lit only by a single trembling flame. I thought of the countless generations that had passed through this world, never hearing the song beneath their feet. Then I whispered a final word, not a prayer, but a promise. We will remember. The air trembled. For a brief instant I could swear the stone answered back. Dawn in Egypt does not come gently. It spills over the horizon like the memory of fire, ancient, sacred, unrelenting. The light touches the stones of Giza, and for an instant they seem to awaken. Every edge glows gold, every shadow deepens, and the air itself feels alive, vibrating with something more than heat, a pulse, a remembrance. That morning, as I stood before the Great Pyramid, I no longer saw a monument of death, but a vessel of life, a message left for those who would one day look beyond myth and see the architecture of eternity. It is said that time buries all things, but time also reveals when the world is ready. The ancients knew this. They built for the ages, not the empires. They measured not by reigns or dynasties, but by the breath of the cosmos. And so their message survived encoded in geometry, in vibration, in the eternal dialogue between light and shadow. When I returned to the side of the Sphinx, I watched as the first rays of the sun struck its face, that solemn, timeless gaze fixed eternally toward the east. Beneath the scars of millennia, I saw more than erosion. I saw watermarks deep, rounded fissures carved not by sand or wind, but by rain. rain that has not fallen on this land for over 12,000 years. The Sphinx, guardian of the horizon, had witnessed storms that predated Egypt itself. I knelt beside its paws and felt the tremor of understanding. This monument was not built by the pharaohs, but for them or perhaps before them. Its leonine body once faced the constellation of Leo, and on that same morning, in 10,500 BC, Orion's belt hung directly above the three pyramids, mirrored perfectly on the ground. The sky and the earth were one. This was the language of the ancients, the covenant between heaven and stone. They called that age Zep Tepi the first time. It was not myth. It was memory, the echo of a civilization erased by flood and fire, yet unwilling to let its light die. The builders of Giza, of Göbekli Tepe, of the Osirion, were not dreamers or slaves. They were survivors, the last custodians of a wisdom so vast that even ruin could not erase it. As I traced my hand along the limestone, I realized the purpose of their silence. They could not speak in words, for words decay. They spoke in proportion, in the eternal grammar of mathematics, in the resonance of stone and starlight. What they built was not meant to be understood by the mind alone, but by the soul, an awakening written in frequency. Modern science calls it coincidence, the ratios of pi and phi encoded in the pyramid's dimensions, the alignment to true north, the harmonic correspondences to planetary orbits. But to those who listen with the inner ear, it is music, a song that spans millennia, rising from the bones of the earth itself. These are not accidents, they are signatures, evidence that once, long ago, humanity walked in harmony with the cosmos. I have come to believe that the Great Pyramid is not a tomb nor a temple, but a threshold, a portal between worlds of matter and spirit. Its geometry hums with the same frequency as the planet's core. Its chambers align with Orion and Sirius, as if channeling the very breath of the heavens into the heart of the earth. It is less a monument and more a living equation, the blueprint of consciousness itself. And yet, the guardians of the present age remain silent. The sealed doors within the pyramid, the great void above the Grand Gallery, the forbidden chambers beneath the Sphinx, all remain untouched. Officially, it is to preserve the monument. Unofficially, it is to preserve the narrative. For if those doors were opened, if the void were explored, the foundations of history would tremble. And now, the journey returns to silence. The winds of Giza fall still, the stars drift above the desert like ancient witnesses, and the stones, those eternal keepers of memory, stand unchanged, yet never the same to those who have truly seen them. We came seeking answers in the dust of history, and instead found questions older than time itself. Perhaps that was always the secret the ancients guarded, that truth is not uncovered by hands, but awakened within the soul. Each mystery we explored, the Sphinx that remembers the reigns of another age, the pyramids aligned to the breath of the cosmos, the silent chambers that hum with invisible song. They were not built to glorify kings, but to awaken those who would someday return to listen. What we call lost civilizations may not be lost at all. They live in vibration, in geometry, in the quiet pulse beneath the earth. The builders of these wonders did not vanish. They became the resonance that still moves through stone and star. Their message was not, "We were here, but you will remember." And now, perhaps, you have. Because this is not just their story, it is ours. The pulse of that ancient world still beats in every heart that seeks light within the shadows, every mind that dares to question what it has been taught. We are not separate from them. We are their echo, the continuation of their dream. When you look upon these ruins again, let reverence replace doubt. When you gaze at the night sky, see not distance, but dialogue. The same constellations that guided them still watch over us. The same mystery that moved them still stirs within you. You were not drawn here by coincidence. You were called by memory, by destiny, by the voice of an age that refuses to be forgotten. And now that you have heard it, you carry its light forward. Keep searching, keep wondering, keep the fire alive, because every act of curiosity, every spark of awe is a form of remembrance. If this journey has touched something within you, leave a trace, a word, a thought, a whisper below, and share it with those who still sleep in the silence of forgetting. For the sands may bury kingdoms, but not truth. Truth endures in light, in stone, and in you. And so we end where all things eternal begin, in silence. But truth is patient. It waits beneath the sand, beneath the surface of what we think we know. And when we are ready, when our arrogance softens into wonder, the stones will speak again. I have walked through the tunnels of the Serapeum, stood in the shadow of the Osirian, traced the constellations that mirror Giza's stones. Each place whispers the same message. You have forgotten, but you will remember. Perhaps that is the real prophecy of Egypt, not of gods or kings, but of awakening. Humanity is not climbing toward enlightenment for the first time. We are returning to it. The monuments are not relics of our ancestors. They are reminders from our former selves. And as the light of the new day washed over the desert, I understood what the ancients had written in silence, that every age must fall asleep to be reborn, that beneath the sands of amnesia lies not darkness, but waiting light. The gods were never gods. They were human radiant, awakened, divine in their remembrance of unity. And they left their wisdom for us buried not to hide it, but to test if we would seek it. The time of forgetting is ending. The stones are stirring, and the light that once guided them now calls to us again.